Okay, we are live. Hello, hello. Today we're going to talk about something where we might start with a bit of a heavy heart, and hopefully by the end of this, we'll have a bit of a lighter heart. And I really want to acknowledge that this is a heavier topic, but it's a very deeply human topic. And it's something that I think anyone from any background, any part of the world can relate to. So I just want to set the intention for this to be a safe, compassionate space to explore and reflect on one of the common threads of humanity, which is grief. So in this conversation, I'm going to cover lots of different types of grief. Of course, we're going to talk about animal suffering. We'll talk about climate grief. We'll talk about personal loss and how our societies deal with personal loss. We'll also talk about emotional expression, creativity, and compassion, and of course, the deep human suffering happening right now in the world that we are all grieving, especially in Palestine and Sudan, and other parts of the world that are suffering from some horrific impacts of genocide. But just to start, I do want to introduce myself. So, hello, my name is Sunny. I'm the founder of Vegan Sunny. This is my cookbook behind me. I spent over a year in East Africa, really deeply immersing myself in the amazing culinary traditions of Swahili food. And so I love sharing this offering with the world, my Vegan Swahili cookbook. And I love bringing people together to talk about solutions for a brighter future in the world that we want to live in. And I wanted to have this conversation today because my heart was feeling heavy. Just so many horrible things going on. I mean, there's so much grief right now in the queer community related to the recent Supreme Court urgings overturning gay marriage legality in the United States. There's so much grief for the suffering in Palestine and the communities there that are absolutely being decimated. And obviously, war is just another capitalistic machine in order to create profits and profitability. And the collective grief that my community in the vegan space has when we talk about animal suffering and the loss of life having to do with all of the animal suffering related to how people eat, that is not necessary. So we're going to go through all of this. I do want to really start, though, and speak directly to the plant-based, the vegan community, the community of people who do care deeply about animals, because I know that's something, especially when you're early on in your journey, that so many people really struggle with, is that massive amount of grief all of a sudden hitting you when you make this conscious choice to shift your eating habits and realize how much suffering that you've inflicted on the world unnecessarily for all of your life up until that point. And I think there is a specific moment in this animal rights movement and mindset where people recall all of these different times and spaces and places where they were taking in animal flesh and taking in animal products and realize the amount of suffering that we are responsible for in the world. And one of my core beliefs in this human experience is that there are cycles of suffering. There are many kinds of cycles, but especially when it comes to cycles of suffering, if we're continuing to pour into that cycle through our habits, through our diet, through our words or our actions, then we're going to continue in that cycle and feel that suffering upon ourselves. And I know, especially in the vegan community, we really struggle with these feelings of hopelessness and helplessness sometimes, because we know we're only 3% of the global population. We know the world probably isn't going vegan, definitely not overnight. And so there's this massive amount of grief for all of this life and all of these animals that we really struggle to communicate, because it's something that weighs so heavy on us. And I think this comes back to a lot of ways that we handle grief, is that to communicate it, but really through that communication, that's how we're able to process it. Through speaking with people with similar shared experiences, we're able to really recognize our feelings and transmute those emotions from that heavy, deep-seated grief and pain into something more like acceptance and understanding. But we really can't get through that transmutation process without having people and community and the ability to see that this is a shared experience. So let me know in the comments if you have felt any grief, especially on any of the topics I've so far just kind of touched on, or in this kind of vegan grieving all the lives lost that we're responsible for, and all the lives that we can't save because our advocacy simply can't reach everyone. And I also want to talk a lot in this conversation about guilt versus grief. And for me, guilt versus grief is something that I have thought just a ton about because I feel like they're incredibly interconnected. So my feelings of grief are deeply tied into feelings of guilt, as in, I wish I'd done something more. I wish I had contributed in a different way. I wish I could have done better. I wish I could have saved those people, those animals, or whatever it may be. And I think grief is placing the blame on our own shoulders, guilt is placing the blame on our own shoulders, whereas grief is just truly feeling the loss and feeling that sense of helplessness that we can't come back from. And these are both things that I've suffered from a lot in my life. I think that there is no human that is untouched by loss and by grief. And if you are, then that is quite the privilege. But I believe that most of us can relate to grieving loved ones lost, pets lost, family members lost, the people across the world who are losing their lives senselessly to violence. And there's so much that I want us to recognize in this grieving process, that we can never pour from an empty cup. So we have to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves so we can continue to contribute to the causes that are closest to our heart. And taking care of ourselves when it comes to grief requires truly sitting with that grief. And it's so difficult. It's so difficult. It's so much easier to try to distract ourselves, right? I've lost so many loved ones, and instead of sitting with the grief in those moments, I really tried to run away. And I think that's very common for lots of us, to try to run away from what is painful instead of really sitting with those painful feelings and understanding them so we can understand a bit more about ourselves. So let me know in the comments if you've had any experiences where, rather than honoring your grief, you found yourself distracting yourself or running away, or maybe doing some unintentional activities that were maybe not the best for you, that kind of gave you a strong other emotion. So a rush or adrenaline or excitement, and leaning into that so you could have something that's even more powerful or distracting than the grief. Because I know I've definitely chased adrenaline, definitely tried to run away from my grief all across the world, across different realities that have existed in my life. And it always comes back to, no matter how long you put it off, no matter how much time you spend avoiding recognizing that grief and sitting with it, you're never going to be able to move on if you don't allow yourself to feel and process. And feeling might be crying about it. It might be journaling and writing about it. It might be, if you're an artist, making a song about it. Even if you don't consider yourself an artist, I believe that anybody truly can be an artist. All that is required to create art is curiosity and the willingness to play, just like play around and understand that things might not go exactly how you want them to, but through that creative process, we learn more about ourselves. And especially when creating art, whether that's poetry or journaling or writing a song or drawing or painting, we might be able to express something that we can't even put into words, because so much of this grief and so much of this pain and loss is truly so hard to talk about and communicate. And I'm even getting a little bit worked up speaking now about this. The reason I wanted to have this conversation in the first place is I was feeling the weight and the heaviness of all of the grief that I've felt throughout my life. And this is part of my artistic practice, right? Is speaking to you and hoping that my story, my words, and my reflections that I've gone through in the process of losing so many loved ones, the process of losing pets who I loved, and the process of seeing my community and communities that I care deeply about suffering in very, very tragic ways. Speaking about it and speaking with people who can relate and who care about it is a great way to allow yourself to recognize those feelings and breathe in those feelings and breathe out what you want to let go of. And I think really sitting with the feelings, instead of, there's the metaphor of just like pushing the feelings down, like there's a box in your head that you can just like stuff all those feelings in the box and then shut the lid on the box. No matter what, that box is going to open, and those feelings are going to have to come out at some point. It's just a matter of, are you going to be able to channel those feelings into something productive, whether that's being able to relate and communicate with loved ones or friends, whether that's being able to create some art that allows you to maybe let go of some of that heaviness, or are those feelings going to get expressed in destructive ways where you find yourself putting yourself in situations that you normally wouldn't, that aren't the best for you because you're just trying to distract yourself. So I want us just to take a moment. Let's do a little bit of box breathing. Let's tell our nervous system that we are okay. The reason I like to do this box breathing, especially in tough conversations like this, is it's going to slow down our heart rate. It's going to allow us to clear our minds, because when we focus on our breath, if we can truly, truly focus on our breath for each second that we're doing this box breathing, we're going to be able to just have a clear slate mentally. And then we'll be able to come back, hopefully with an open heart, open mind for the rest of the conversation. So just to do our box breathing to begin, we're going to do 4 cycles of 4. Those steps are going to be breathing in, holding at the top, breathing out, and holding at the bottom. So as I do this, we'll breathe in for 4, we'll hold for 4 at the top, we'll breathe out for 4 coming down, and we'll hold for 4 at the bottom. So sit up tall. After you breathe in, hold. Breathe out. And hold. Don't breathe in yet. Now breathe in. And hold. Breathe out. And hold. 2 more. Breathe in. And hold. And breathe out. And hold. Last one. Breathe in. And hold. Breathe out. And hold. And this kind of box breathing, these nervous system resets, I just want you to sit with that for a second. So just feel how your body might feel a little bit different. Feel how you might feel like you can just relax a little bit and just let go of something that wasn't serving you, that you don't want to hold on to anymore. And really, if you still feel like there's some more you can let go of, you can always do another cycle. You can rewind this and watch it again and again, just to allow yourself to reset your nervous system. Tell yourself, even though up here things might not feel okay, be in your physical body and feel like, okay, I'm here, I'm present. Even if my mind is not feeling all right now, I can feel okay in my body. And that's something that I think is very important as we're all going through these processes of grief, is really recognizing, okay, what is my body telling me? What is my mind telling me? What's the disconnect? And is my mind lying to me? Am I feeling these things mentally as a result of overwhelm that maybe isn't necessarily true? So now that we've done that reset, I want to come back to this conversation. Just keep an open heart, an open mind. Of course, I want to talk about, how we can hold on to compassion without burning out. And also, I really want to talk about community and community connection and how community can help us lighten the load a little bit. But to just touch on compassion, I know a lot of us are really, really great at being compassionate for others, and we sometimes struggle to have that compassion towards ourselves, especially if you're like me, if you're an empath, if you're somebody who really, really can almost feel other people's emotions, if you're in a space with them and can understand what they're feeling, it's sometimes easier to try to make others feel better than to try to make yourself feel better. And remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. And sometimes comforting others is exactly what is needed in the moment. And sometimes they're going to need to comfort you. And that's exactly what's needed in the moment. And so we always need to be aware that sometimes we're more willing to give than we are to receive. And sometimes we're more willing to receive than we are to give. And this can be the same person. Like the same person, different times, can feel so willing to give that compassion and care and love, but they're not going to share what's heavy on their heart to receive that compassion and care and love. And at other times, maybe they are sharing what's really speaking to them in that moment, the feelings that are heavy that they want to release or at least express to kind of share that collective burden. And it's just a balance. We should always be mindful that part of community is taking up space and allowing others to take up space. And I think especially when we're talking about grief and suffering, there are so many of us who have felt like we cannot take up space. And that's something I really, really want to speak to you directly. If you have ever felt like you can't take up space, like you can't express your true feelings or your true emotions that might be a burden to someone, I really want to encourage you to recognize that some of that mental self-doubt is a narrative that was placed there by somebody other than yourself who may have wanted to control you or to oppress you in some way. And it's so powerful for us to reclaim our emotions and our emotional ability to express and connect, because emotions are so much of human expression and human connection. And when we cut off our loved ones, our friends, our family, our community from our true emotions, even if we don't realize it, we're putting up a wall between ourselves and them. But really allowing ourselves to be honest and express those emotions, that brings us closer, that builds deeper community bonds. And it is so necessary as a human to recognize those emotions, let them out. And sometimes if you can't let them out with a person, you can tune back into some of your artistic practices. Anyone can journal. If you don't like to write, do voice note journals, speak into your phone, talk about whatever's heavy on your mind, paint, draw, do some kind of creative activity. Even movement is so, so valuable. If you don't want to do any of those things I just mentioned, but you need to express some emotions, you can put on a song and dance to it, or you can just shake it off. I like to just shake my arms, shake my head, shake my wrists, and just let it go. Allow things to release. This is one of my other favorite ones. If I'm feeling any kind of heavy negative emotion, just flicking my fingers like this, I'm allowing whatever is built up inside of me to release. And I am truly someone who believes in emotions as not a mental only expression, but a physical expression as well. So I do believe that emotions are stored in our bodies. I do Reiki practice. I do energy work. That's something you can email me, hello@vegansunny.com, if you want to get involved with. But I really, really do believe that a lot of these emotions, if we don't process them as they come up in the moment, they're, like I said before, they're not going away, but they do end up getting stored somewhere in the body. So we might feel heavy emotions in, say, our throat or our throat chakra, where all the things that we haven't said, all the things that we've kept hidden and kept pushed down are stored here. And we might feel some heaviness or constantly get sore throats. We might feel some hurt and grief and loss that we don't process, that gets stored in our heart. When I lost my fiance, when he passed away from cancer, I felt like my heart literally just like cleaved in half. I felt like there was something that broke in my chest. And as I've gone through this healing process and doing this energy work, doing this connection, allowing myself to express my feelings, I felt like whatever that fracture or break was began to knit back together and come back together. I believe that if we're worried about fear or judgment of others. That can manifest in the stomach. We might get stomach cramps or stomach pain. And if this resonates with you, let me know in the comments if you've ever felt some of those emotions show up in your body. And I do believe that it's very common. I think that it might be every human has these emotional responses that aren't just mental, it's physical. So just keep that in mind as you are working through grief and these very heavy emotions, that while they come up is the best time to honor them, acknowledge them, and express them. Otherwise, they might get stored in the body and it can take even longer to draw them out and release them. And I also just want you to remember that community connection is so important. Having people you love and trust, or even just people you trust, if that's a therapist or some kind of psychologist or a person who you could just talk to about those feelings honestly and just get it all out without having to filter yourself. That is one of the most valuable connections and relationships you can have, because once you allow yourself to release, then you allow yourself to truly free up space in your body and be honest with yourself. And I think that being honest with yourself is super important. And the next part of this grief that I want to touch on, because I know so many of us are struggling and feel paralyzed about the climate crisis, is climate grief. I want to talk about the emotional toll of witnessing environmental destruction of our one and only planet Earth for the profit of just a few billionaires or individuals. So that's something that I feel the most hopelessness about the most often. I worked as a climate activist for over 7 years, working to pass laws to protect the environment, to increase renewable energy. And I've seen that we are at such an uphill battle, and these big mega corporations really do not care about people. They care about extracting and profiting off of what they extract, to the detriment of the only world that can sustain human life that we know of. And this is something that fills me with a lot of grief, but also a lot of anger, because how dare they, right? How dare these big companies who don't know me, who I don't know, take away my rights to clean drinking water and fresh air to breathe and a climate that's consistent, that isn't up and down and hottest years on record year after year after year. And to me, not only does it really make me angry, but it also is incredibly frustrating, because we know that there's solutions. We know that we do not have to organize as a species in this way. We know we don't need fossil fuels at the extent we're using them. There are so many funds available for investment in research and development and technology, and they should be going towards renewable and regenerative and sustainable research and infrastructure and energy. And we're not seeing that at the level we need it to, because it's so much easier for profit reasons to just continue business as usual. But of course, it's a finite planet with finite resources, and eventually there will be no more oil to extract from the earth. And eventually we will be seeing some even more extreme climate collapse. And I know that in my work in climate activism, I've seen that it's very common that climate grief is often expressed as anger. And there's this almost trope of the angry environmentalist, right? And I think that as much as it is better for us to find love and compassion, sometimes it's very hard to find compassion for the ultra wealthy who are destroying our planet so they can have a 19th home or whatever they need all of that extra money for. And obviously need is a bit of a sarcastic remark there. No one needs $1 billion. No one even probably needs $1 million, or definitely not 100 million. So why are we seeing all of this destruction, all of this pain? And the solution for us, for our own sanity, what a lot of people adopt is just not even paying attention, just blinders on, like I'm just going to live my life, do my day to day. I have more important things to worry about. I have bills to pay, I have kids to feed, I have things to worry about in my life right here and now. So most people don't even have the bandwidth to fully engage with how grievous the climate crisis is, because it's too much. And a lot of these conversations around grief are just too much for most people. And I think that that's a product of our society, of living in a society that doesn't encourage expression and artistic exploration and genuine feelings and genuine emotions. And I think that the power of activism and collective organizing can be a very productive outlet for grief. So if you're somebody who feels very deeply passionate about climate change, about fighting the climate crisis, and you want to get involved, either visit Action Network and find some actions you can do in your local area, or you can start your own initiative to tackle the problems that you're most passionate about, or join a nonprofit, whether to work or volunteer, that is doing the work for community care that is deeply relevant to you. All of these things are immensely powerful tools. And if every single person who cared about these issues was putting in those hours, I do believe that our movement in terms of the climate advocacy movement would be a lot further along. And I know it's hard because we all have limited time, we all have limited resources. It is so much easier to allow ourselves to get distracted, whether that's by TV or social media or something, like food or comfort that engages us in a way that we don't have to think about this grief. Obviously, it is something that takes work to process our feelings and our grief and then take action. And I do think that the power of collectives, the power of collective action and community is, again, so important here, because I think the ultra wealthy extractive movements really are successful because they are fragmenting us and making people feel alone. And so one of the most important things we can do is just to remember that we are not alone. So let me know in the comments if you have any kind of feelings about what it might mean to be in community and to work towards a climate and environment that is one you would rather see than the one that we're heading towards. And I think we all owe it to ourselves to head towards the world that we want to live in. And I think one of the most toxic things about our current reality is that most people are very closed off from determining what our collective future as a human species is going to look like. There are a select few, I want to call them like monarchs. I mean, it's these billionaires, these trillion-dollar corporation owners and shareholders and stakeholders who are driving humanity in this direction towards extraction and ecosystem collapse and climate collapse so they can enrich themselves. And I'm sure they want to, go off planet and do it all over again, leave the rest of us here to rot and struggle. And again, that's something that a lot of people are grieving, is just that uncertainty. The human species, we've existed for tens of thousands of years, and all of a sudden the actions from the past 200-300 years since the Industrial Revolution are just hurtling us towards all of this terrifying ecosystem collapse. And we have to ask ourselves, what can we do to strengthen and fortify ourselves first, because you can't pour from an empty cup, and then our communities, the people who are closest to us. And we really do have to look at this as a bottom-up approach of organizing and collective action and coming together to create the world we want to see. And I know that it is hard. I have so much respect and admiration and love for all of the activists who pour their hearts and soul into trying to create a better world and a better future that we might not even live to see. We might not even live to see a world in which we're able to dismantle some of these extremely extractive processes. We might not live to see the world in which economic inequality is finally lessened, reduced. I think we need something like a universal income to make sure that everybody can meet their basic needs. So I have fought for that through various campaigns, and yet I might not live to see the world in which everyone has their basic needs met through a universal income or social services or something like this. But I will still continue on this journey because I do believe that it is one of the most important things that I can do with my time, with my voice, with my presence, is to tell people you're not alone. I know that we have all suffered, we're all scared, but if we can transmute those emotions of pain and frustration and fear into action towards the world that we want to see, that is also another form of creative expression that can allow us to work through these very heavy emotions. And of course, not only do we have grief for animal suffering in the vegan community, grief for the climate crisis in the global community, but we also all are dealing with personal loss, and our society doesn't honor personal loss in the ways that we need it to. So, I mean, modern culture truly does just rush people through grief and avoid talking about it. So there's the toxic positivity movement of people saying everything's fine, everything's fine, everything's always fine, when of course things aren't fine. But, you know, if you ask somebody, hey, how are you doing? It's almost like socially a faux pas or socially unacceptable to be honest if you are feeling some of those heavier, more classically classified as negative emotions. So somebody says, hey, how are you doing? And then you're like, oh, you know, like I just lost my loved one. Like I'm feeling so down and so alone and just so uncertain about the future. That is not usually how people would honestly answer that question. People are almost, I would say, conditioned to not be honest with ourselves and our feelings because we're sparing other people's feelings. And the whole point of community is to be able to come together and work through things. And those things that we're working through can't always be rainbows and flowers and sunshine. So I do think that we need to normalize talking about grief. You can join grief circles, you can join grief communities, you can join different organizations. Of course, if you have the funds or the insurance or the capacity, getting therapy or psychiatric or psychological assistance is something that's really, really valuable. And I do believe that there's so much importance in remembrance and storytelling and telling the stories of our loved ones who are no longer with us, and truly recognizing that they live on through our memory and through our words and our actions that are inspired by them. I'm getting emotional thinking about it now because it's just so important to me that we don't allow our modern culture of rushing and hustling and just trying to prioritize making money to take away from the very sacred, very important human practices and traditions of remembering and telling stories about our loved ones who we've lost, and really holding space for mourning and honoring and celebrating the lives of the people we lost. That is something that takes time. Those are very, very intense emotions that can take years or a lifetime to work through. I mean, I lost my fiance back in 2017, so it's been 8 years, almost 8 years, and that's still something that I'm working through. And I'm working through losing loved ones like my grandma over 20 years ago, or almost 20 years ago, working through losing my cousin over 20 years ago, but working through losing people who I love and care about is something that I think for me has so far been a lifelong journey. I don't think that I'll ever fully be over it, but I do think that the world we live in wants people to just get over it. And that to me is just so harmful and toxic, because that's part of what makes us human, is remembering those who are no longer with us and carrying their stories with us throughout the world. And I definitely want to touch on emotional suppression and vulnerability. I'm being, very vulnerable in this conversation now, in this chat now, because these are things I think we need to talk about, but it's not easy. It really isn't easy. I wouldn't necessarily say it's fun, but I do think that it is necessary. And this is an energy exchange that I want to provide, because I think that we need to talk about this. And I'm here if you want to talk about this. Let me know in the comments if there's anyone you love, any cause that you love, any community that you are grieving for, any person you're grieving for. We can honor and celebrate them together. And I think that it's so important to have that space. And especially in the world that we live in, I am very scared and very worried about the ability to express these kinds of emotions, especially when it comes to men. I think men's emotional vulnerability and expression has been twisted and turned into something where there's this narrative that, strong men don't cry, which I think is absolutely crazy. I think that is ridiculous. I think anyone who's healthy should be able to cry and have that freedom to express their emotions through that outlet. We all have tear ducts for a reason. It's because in the human experience, we need to cry sometimes. And I do think that there is a really, really toxic narrative I want to play some part in dismantling that says emotions are weakness. Because to me, emotions are one of the biggest strengths that we have. I believe emotions in some capacity are communication with the divine, our intuition and divine inspiration, and should be honored and should be felt. And every time we're repressing and pushing them down, we're turning our backs on divinity. And I think that it is so, so important for us to recognize that there is no emotion that is inherently masculine or feminine or anything like that. Every single human has the full range of human emotions available to them, and expressing them makes you a more well-rounded human. And I don't think it's okay to live in a world that only is accepting of the so-called positive emotions like joy and happiness and all of the kind of uplifting emotions. We don't have to always be, in a good mood. We're allowed to feel what we feel, and we need to feel our feelings in order to be able to truly feel those so-called higher vibrational feelings like joy and love and connection. Because if we're repressing our actual feelings, even if we might outwardly seem like we're joyous, that is probably not genuine. And I do think genuine emotional connection is so important. I think vulnerability is personal bravery. I think that it's honesty toward yourself. I think when we're vulnerable, when we allow ourselves to express our feelings, we are being really, really honest with ourselves. And if you can't be honest with yourself, who can you be honest with in this world? I think it's so important for us to really hold space for our emotions and honestly feel them. And of course, express them in a safe space. Of course, express them around people who are open to receiving them and are able to hold that space for you in community. I'm not saying, go and start crying to your boss or start, crying to somebody who is going to make you feel bad about it or feel worse about it. Of course, you need to protect your peace and your energy. But I do believe that it is incredibly important to create places of emotional safety. So to create a home environment or a community or an activist space where you feel emotionally safe enough to express these emotions and know that they aren't going to be used against you. And I do think that we live in a world where our emotions get used against us a lot of the time. And I think that it's important to have spaces where that's not going to happen. So you are able to be genuine and vulnerable and allow those emotions to be released. So we don't store them in our body, and then they might manifest in chronic pain or illness or aches or other physical symptoms that then are even going to take more work to get through. And I truly believe that from my experience with grief, I tried to stay in motion and be very, very distracted and try to just like distract myself from my genuine feelings. And I do believe now, having lived through that and seen the alternatives, that slowing down is essential to allow grief to move instead of getting stuck. So, my being in motion and trying to go out and do all these things and travel and be just so constantly active externally was something I was doing to prevent myself from thinking and reflecting and feeling my grief. And it's only been when I've slowed down and felt those feelings come up and just truly let them out, whether that's crying or writing or making art or singing a song or even just like literally like just yelling into a pillow. Getting those emotions out is so important, and we might not know how they need to be released if we don't slow down and stick with it. And I do believe that there are many forms of art that can allow you to express grief. I also use cooking as a way to express my grief. You know, cooking the favorite meals of people I've loved who have lost has been something that's transformative for me. Being able to add the same spices and chop the same fruits and vegetables and create this combination that they've made and that they loved is something that I truly, truly feel is one of the most magical things I can do to express and allow that grief to move through me and to be transformed and transmuted into something beautiful, which is a beautiful meal. And I think turning pain into creative expression is one of the most beautiful ways that we can honor what we've lost. And I really encourage you, when you're feeling those moments of pain, of grief, of suffering, of loneliness or hopelessness, to try to turn that into a creative expression. And you might find yourself feeling a little lighter and a little more free. And I do think that creative inspiration is something that's almost the aftermath of the storm of emotions. So you might just sit with it first, sit with it and cry and allow yourself to feel and let it go. And then after you sit with it, you might feel like, oh, like I should make this, or I should do this creative activity. And you're opening up space in yourself for that creativity to flow through. And I will say also that compassion, I think, is essential in this process of collectively working to transmute grief. And Randomish TV, hello, peace and love. Thank you for being here. Sorry, I haven't been looking at the comments as much as I should have, but I'm so grateful for all of you who are here with me. You see me crying, I'm not going to apologize for it. I think I see people say sorry about crying way too often, and I'm not saying you have to spend all day crying, but I do think that we need to normalize expressing our feelings and expressing our emotions and allow ourselves to be here and present with what we feel in the moment. That's the best way that we can move on, because I know a lot of us feel these heavy feelings and we want to move on and we need to move on, and we're not sure how to move on. And of course, I'm not saying it's going to go away forever. The grief cycles come in waves. I still grieve for people I've lost decades ago, but being able to be present with yourself in the moment is so valuable. And one of the best ways that you can do it is by expressing what you feel instead of pushing it down or trying to distract yourself. And I really just want to, I guess, end and close this off with some practical ways to move through grief. It's something that we all are going to deal with, I believe, throughout our lives. I feel like I've loved and lost for as long as I can remember. I don't think it's going to stop. I think that's part of the human experience. So I do want to remind you that grief is a sign of love and connection. It is not a weakness. And like I said towards the beginning, I wanted to do this live and have this conversation because I do feel myself in that state of grief. It comes in waves, it comes and goes, and this is a way for me to use my voice, hopefully. I should have put some tissues nearby. but hopefully to inspire somebody else to be a little bit more honest with themselves and with how you're feeling. And of course, we need community spaces. You can join me at plantpoweredpath.com. We can dive into how we can deal with grief. I especially talk about it in terms of climate activism and plant-based activism and working to end animal suffering in the world, and climate suffering. But of course, we can have these conversations as it relates to personal grief, the grief around communities who are senselessly losing their lives and rights all around the world. And I also think that it's really powerful when you're moving through grief to have some rituals of remembrance. So maybe planting a tree or any plant on the anniversary of a loved one's death. Maybe creating art to remind ourselves of how we felt in that moment. Maybe it's lighting a candle for every loved one that we've lost, and just looking at those flames flickering and recognizing that, all things will come to an end, and that's okay. And when you feel yourself in that overwhelm, really turning back to community and loved ones and people who can walk with you on this path and, allow you to express those emotions in a safe space. And let me know in the comments if there are any practices that you have as it relates to grief and healing and honoring your emotions that you think would be valuable for other people. Just a gentle reminder, none of us are alone in this, even though grief is one of those things that can make you feel so lonely and so helpless and so hopeless. You are not alone. You are loved. You are cared for. And I have a longer video about this on my channel. The secret to joy is more compassion, that you can definitely check out after this video. And thank you so much for being here, for holding this space, for breathing with me, for seeing me, for allowing me to, I guess I just did this because I needed to get some stuff out. So what a creative practice. Making videos, talking about things, just talking about it. That is a great way to work through your grief, and work through any emotion. So, and Haas Vegan said, use poetry and songwriting to express grief. I love that. I love poetry. I love writing, reading. Maybe I'll share some of my poetry with you guys on my next live. I think that writing, and even if you can't say it out loud, getting those feelings out, making sure that it doesn't just stay in here, because our brains are really powerful, but they're meant to create ideas. They're not necessarily meant to hold ideas for an extended period of time. So just allow yourself to get out what you're thinking, what you're feeling, because I've noticed in my life that if I don't get out whatever is recurring thoughts in my mind, that I'm actually never going to be able to get past it. Like, I'll keep coming back to those recurring thoughts. But if I am able to write it out, talk about it, that's how I'm able to let it go. So allow yourself some outlets to take those thoughts and put that outside of your mind so you can let it go. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in. I know this wasn't as high vibe as we usually are, but I'm being real. This is how I was feeling today. This is how I felt like I could show up today. You don't have to feel like you have to fake being super happy. I think we don't ever want to use toxic positivity. We should allow ourselves to feel our emotions, feel and express. That's something that I am working to do more regularly. I'll have some tissues next time in case I get back to this state. Roxas, I love this sports. I love this Muay Thai fighter. Let's go. 1.8 meter. Okay, you're a big guy. 30 kg muscle mass, and people still say vegans can't do sports. That's amazing. Of course, you can build tons of muscle on a plant-based diet. Just look at Roxas. There's so many amazing plant-based athletes out there. I also agree movement is super powerful. That's something I didn't touch on, so I'm really grateful for you, Roxas, for bringing that up. Movement is one of the best ways we can express ourselves. I did touch on it a little bit when I said dance or shake it off. I like to do this one anytime I'm feeling something. I'm like, ooh, like I don't know if that's what I want to hold in my heart. Just try to let it go, doing these finger flicks. I also practice yoga and qigong on my channel. You can look at Energy Remedy. It's a playlist of qigong videos of me working to work through some of my grief in real time through movement and mindfulness, and recognizing that we are energetic beings. The energy that flows through us flows through each other, flows through rivers and valleys and streams and clouds and the world around us. We're all 70% water. So that means that the water that we're in, is in our bodies, the water that we are made of, was once the ocean and the rivers and the clouds and the rain and the streams, and the water and other beings. So we're all connected. We're all one. We're all truly, truly collectivity. The human species, I believe, is one organism with many different actors, but we're all connected. We're all emotionally, physically, the cells that make up our body is made from water that once was in somebody else. And Haz, I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for hanging out with me as I work through some of the heavy emotions that were on my heart today. The process of grief, yes, it is very complex. I agree. We should not suppress. We should never suppress. I've lived a life of feeling and repressing those feelings, and I feel much better feeling them, expressing them, putting them out into the world, and allowing myself to take up space and allowing my emotions to take up space. And I think that's very valuable. So I'm gonna stop crying on here. Oh my gosh, but I appreciate you guys. I appreciate everyone who tuned in. I appreciate everyone who brought their unique perspectives. If you are watching after this live, definitely let me know in the comments your biggest takeaway from this video. I really want to know the conversations that you think we need when it comes to grief, because I do think that we live in a world that tries to silence some of these heavier emotions and doesn't hold enough space for them, and that we are stronger, we are more connected, and we are more honest with ourselves, which allows us to be more honest with the world when we feel our emotions and give ourselves the freedom and the permission and the space to accept them. So don't forget to like and subscribe and keep leaving me comments. And I have so much love for all of you, sending that out, receiving all of this wonderful energy that you've brought with me today. And I will see you next time. Lots of love, y'all.